Thank you for the reminder system. But we will switch it off when it gets to the questions at the end. So Roy has been here as a Digital Futures visiting fellow with the Sustainable Futures Lab in the Department of Media Technology and Interaction Design. And I'm going to let him take it away.
Thank you, Rob. All right. Yeah, so welcome, everyone. Hi. We had some technical difficulties and we solved them, so I feel like everything is just fine now, right? To do anything, say anything. I'd like to just start by briefly introducing myself. Are those online? Can you see the slides as well? Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah,
super.
Perfect. All right, excellent. So I'm an associate professor of critical design, which means that I'm quite interested in the social, political, and environmental context of design, the kind of sites where design operates and the political tensions around that. In general, I combine futures thinking with design making, and I'm interested in seeing how design opens up alternative possibilities for us, something that I think as a society we're certainly thirsty for. My background, as you can see, is actually in the humanities and in social sciences and in the arts. I'm not a designer by trade or by training, but I have been working in a faculty of design for the last 10 years. And some of that, I think, will show in the material that I will share with you today. So why am I talking about digital twins today? I think first, it's important to note that urban digital twins are a technology in the making. And what I mean by that is that by no means this is a mature technology that runs everywhere in a smooth way. I think it's still open enough for us to intervene in how digital twins are being designed and how they are being applied. And in this particular sense, and something that will come up later in the conversation as well, I would like to particularly pay attention to how imaginaries and practices work together. So how we think about the technology and how the technology actually works, how these two modes interact. And I guess, as you'll see from my talk in a bit as well, it's not always straightforward. The second reason that I think urban digital twins deserve our attention is because, like every other new, sometimes AI-based, certainly data-based technology, it's surrounded by hype. There's a lot of claims around what this technology can or can't do, mostly what it can do, anything really. And I think that means that we need to develop our own critical perspectives around it. We need to see it for what it is, for what actually existing urban digital twins are, and kind of develop the tools and the approaches and the techniques that will allow us to be critical in that way. And last, I think it's important for us to de-abstract urban digital twins. So again, to kind of not just pay attention to how people imagine digital twins, but to actually treat them with our empirical research methods. So to actually look at real digital twins on the ground as much as we can, understand the differences between the concepts and what is happening, and in this way help the public navigate the complexity around the technologies as well. So this is the rationale, and I'm going to be sharing with you today some insights from a 3-year research project that I've been involved with. The project is called TWIRL, Digital Twins as Regimes of Visibility, and I'll explain what that means as well. But this is a Team 2 science project funded and facilitated by the Center for Bold Cities. This is a kind of a center of excellence that combines or that shares resources between Delft University of Technology, where I am, but also Erasmus University in Rotterdam, which is more of a social science university, and Leiden University, which is known for its humanities. In this case, we were 5 researchers, 2 in Delft, 2 in Erasmus that do urban geography and urban studies, and 1 researcher from Leiden who does public administration. And the idea behind the project is that we, by learning together, we bring our different perspectives and we both create a collaboration and perhaps address the phenomena here, urban digital twins, with the necessary combined perspectives. We ran the project in 2 stages. So first we conducted interviews in Rotterdam and in The Hague, 2 cities that at least formally both are invested in digital twins and would like to bring them online as much as they can. So we conducted a series of interviews with bureaucrats, so municipality workers, technologists, so those who are developing the tools. I think in total, yeah, there were 26 of these expert interviews, and asked them all kinds of questions around what they think digital twins are, what they hope that they could do, what kind of challenges they're facing, and things like that. And in the second stage, what we did is we conducted two sets of 3 workshops with the public, one set in Rotterdam, one set in The Hague. And I will say more about those in a second. But it's important for me to emphasize that we are still analyzing the data. The papers are being written. They have been presented, but not fully submitted yet. So what I'm showing today is a kind of a peek into the kitchen, if you will, of the project before the meal is ready yet. But that's also why I would appreciate any comments that you may have on it. So these are the workshops that we did, and they form the bulk of what I will talk about today. There were 3 workshops, one dedicated to thinking about data. So what is measured, how it's measured, what goes into the digital twin. One was dedicated to the model, so how the different relations within the digital twin are materialized, what kind of indicators are used and how they're presented. And the third session was all about the kind of decisions that could be made based on urban digital twins. And for that third workshops, we brought municipal workers to the room with the public, because we thought, okay, at this point, if we're talking about what can actually happen with digital twins, it's important that those who will make those decisions are in the room. Now, at this point, we faced a problem, and it's quite a big problem. Neither one of the cities actually has a running urban digital twin that could be used for public engagement. And so, we wanted to see how they could be used, but we had no tools to use it with. And so what we did essentially is we had to invent a digital twin, and we had to invent a digital twin in a speculative manner. And I'll say what that means. But it also, perhaps this is a good time to apologize for the title of the seminar. When I talk about actually existing digital twins, well, perhaps the catch is that there are very few of those actually existing digital twins. So this is what we did. We built a fake digital twin by combining 2 tools. One is something called Furban, which is just a 3D modeling software that was already used for public engagement in Rotterdam, and was about to, the plan was to start using it for The Hague as well. And that gave us a kind of a 3D model of a city that could be visualized both from a kind of a top-down angle, but also from a kind of immersive situated perspective. And we combined that with Microsoft Power BI. So this is a tool that creates essentially dashboards. So you can plug in different data sources, and here you play with the input here, and the dashboard changes accordingly. There are 2 catches for this, though. Well, I'll get there in a second. So essentially on Furban, what we allowed people to do is to locate different urban design elements, so benches, trees, bike racks, all the things that are, would be available for citizens to play with in kind of an urban design situation. And based on their changes, we played manually with these to create a set of different indicators on the dashboard, which is to say we totally faked it. There was no real-time data plugged into this, none. Even if we wanted to, I don't know if we could find all of those data sources. I don't think they even exist in cities. And so that's one thing. And the second thing, this is in Dutch, so I don't know, Swedish Dutch, maybe you can see some of this, but some of these indicators are kind of classic indicators. Air quality, the budget used, things like that. But some of these indicators on the dashboard are very speculative. So ambience, the atmosphere in the city, cleanliness. How the heck do you even quantify cleanliness in a city? I'm not entirely sure. But we wanted to create a speculative dashboard like this and create a speculative experience. Also because we thought this might create provocative experiences and provocative interactions for our participants in the workshop. We kind of wanted to poke them a little bit. We wanted to create things that would push how they might conceive of digital twins and kind of see what happens. Well, did it work or not is the question, and I'll get to that in a second. So The first question that I want to ask today is, well, what are we talking about when we talk about urban digital twins? It does sound like a very trivial question. I mean, of course, everybody knows what urban digital twins is, but our research found that it is all but trivial. So among our 26 interviewees was very little agreement on what digital twins are. Everybody could point to the use of data. Everybody talked about real time. They talked about immersive or visualizations and all kinds of forms of presentation to the public. But if you look here, and I think this is quite representative at the definitions, for instance, by Nokta and all, which looked at public participation, most people understand urban digital twins based on what you can do with them and not what they actually are. And here, the key is help in decision making. Make the issues lively for participants, whether they are city workers, whether they are different kinds of stakeholders or the public, and help making decisions in a kind of participatory way. Something else that we notice is that as the technology itself moves from industry, where it's been used for quite a while, essentially to track elements in real time, right? Whether it's on shipping or whether it's in factories. So as it moves from industry to public administration and to kind of urban settings, it gathers all kinds of magical powers. So suddenly it does more than just help track things. In fact, it could fix everything that doesn't work in cities. All you need is to sprinkle in some urban digital twins and the city will work fantastically. And in this sense, we find that urban digital twins fit right into how we understand the smart city imaginary and rhetoric. And this is something that I've worked on before. If you're curious, you can find this online. The story of the smart city rhetoric might be familiar to you. Because of decades of neoliberal politics, cities are impoverished, they have no budgets, services are falling apart. If you believe Trump, cities are just full of crime, no matter what statistics are saying. Cities need a fix. And in come all of the tech vendors, and they produce and promote all of these data-based systems that will help manage cities in a much more efficient way. It's a cost-cutting solution, but it's also a silver bullet. It will fix everything. And of course, mayors, as noted by Rem Koolhaas, the Dutch architect, cannot really resist the urge to be mayors of a smart city, because then they become smart mayors. And so cities are gulping this kind of rhetoric and investing a lot of money in all of this digital infrastructure. And then, urban digitization becomes this kind of panacea. It's a silver bullet technology. It will solve all the problems that we have. Now, just so I'm clear here, I'm not saying that urban digital twins are not useful at all as means to kind of improve efficiency, right? To make certain systems in cities run better, to help, project certain conditions into the future and see how they could be optimized. But what I am trying to point out here is that in the current climate of urban politics, we both prioritize efficiency over everything else on the one hand, and on the other hand, and this is, I think, even a bit more crucial, we confuse it for other values, such as democratic participation. We say, oh, efficient city will also be more democratic, and you'll see what I mean with that in a second. In any case, I find that the urban imaginary in play here reflects this kind of bureaucratic desire to control messy urban entanglements, right? This is the dream of every bureaucrat, to have control over their domain. And here I'm wondering, are we kind of influenced by simulation games like SimCity? Most people in cities now were kids when SimCity came out. I'm pretty sure many of them played it. I know I did. And this kind of synoptic, in most cases, top-down way to see the city and manage it might prove useful for some things, but it's also not really coherent with our everyday experiences of the city. And this is something that I will come back in a second. So, to conclude my first question, what are we talking about when we talk about urban digital twins? Well, this is my distilled answer. If there's no 4D, it's not a UDT, which is to say, if it does not have the ability to project things in time, it's nothing but a glorified GIS system. It's just a 3D model of a city, and those have been in use for public engagement in cities for at least 20 years now. So are we seeing something new here or not? My argument is that what is new here is this kind of temporality. So the ability to project into the future, this kind of strong effect of urban digital twins, this kind of seeing the future for what it could be, I think has quite a significant productive political power. And in this sense, it's persuasive. We do something, we see it we project it into the future. We believe that that's true. It carries a kind of truth value on its own. I know from other research that I do around futures thinking and design futures, that this is a very powerful way to bring people on board in whatever you're doing. So the second question I want to ask is, what is represented in or by urban digital twins? So our imaginaries set expectations, but urban digital twins exist no matter what as technical infrastructure. So how can we understand how they mediate urban life worlds? And here we introduced in our project what we call a regime of visibility. If we follow Alain Badiou's logic, you say, is, so to be measured is to exist. Then we need to ask, who is measured into existence in urban digital twins? What phenomena is represented? And no less important, what phenomena is not represented? If it's not in the digital twin, effectively it disappears from the horizon of decision making. And also, how do we account for those who don't want to be part of the urban digital twin? I can think about undocumented refugees and other populations that would rather remain invisible to this kind of surveillance apparatus and all of this kind of datafied surveillance apparatus. And we also call this a regime because we see that it operates on different sites. It's not just in one place, it spans the entirety of the social technical, or what we call socio-technical apparatus that is the urban digital twin. So what sites am I talking about? So I'm talking about data. We ask here quite clearly, so what is sensed? What is measured? Where do you put sensors? That, of course, is important. What kind of granularity does the data have? What kind of questions around compatibility and interoperability do we see with data? Some things cannot move through the system. They fall between the cracks. What can we quantify in city life? And here, what we've observed is that often what we measure is what lends itself for measurement. For instance, we talk about safety, but we don't talk about trust, because trust is hard to quantify. Safety, easier. We just look at incidents that involve the police. So to me, what this often feels like is searching for a lost penny under the streetlight instead of where you actually lost the penny. We do what we can, not what needs to be. The second thing, or the second site where we see urban digital twins as regimes of visibility has to do with a model. So what kind of relations between entities are calculated and represented? What assumptions are given material form in models? Which trade-offs appear? And how can they be enacted or solved? And this is quite important because if you look at how public participation around urban decision-making happens, it's most often in the form of trade-offs. So people come in and you say, we can do this, or we can do this, or we can do this. Which one do you want to choose? What rarely happens is that people have actually influence over the options available to them. So how the trade-off is set is actually quite important. But the third site where we see urban digital twins as regimes of visibility has to do with the interface, right? What is displayed, how it's displayed. We all have affinities to certain shapes, to certain colors. What can users interact with? What can be manipulated by users? And this is perhaps the most direct aspect of visibility. I mean, it's quite explicit, but it's important to keep in mind what Ian Bogus, the media theoretician, calls procedural rhetoric, which is to say that how we interact also has an important effect on what we understand as possible and not possible. So it's also the interactive affordances that urban digital twins have. Remember, if there's no interactive affordances, if the system is not dynamic and the user can't play with it, then it's just a static representation of a city, not very useful for us. And of course, so all of these three affect decision-making, which you may recall from the definitions I've shown before, is really the kind of the crux of the matter when it comes to public engagement through urban digital twins. But I also think what we are starting to see here are the limits of datafication itself, and by extension, the limits of the twinning metaphor. To put it plainly, a digital twin of a complex socio-technical system is not a twin at all. How do we communicate this? How do we get people to kind of wrap their heads around it? One of the things I've been doing to try to get to the bottom of these issues is employ what is called speculative design as a means to kind of problematize what we take for granted, open to discussion, different urban issues. As coined by Dunn and Raby in 2013, speculative design does not seek to solve problems. It seeks to reframe them, to communicate them, to open them up to public engagement. It's a way to get people to consider future possibilities and then ask, why are we going the way that we are going? Or are there other directions that perhaps we could be going in? In a sense, it's a tool to explore future possibilities, to turn them into material form and use that to create conversations. It's kind of a creative materialization that foregrounds politics. So here's an example. This is a master's thesis done by Peter Kalkman. It's called Pigeon Predictions. And essentially, he asks here a what-if question. He asks, what if we took pigeons and integrated them into the smart city mechanism? So what he suggests is that every pigeon, you can see it here, every pigeon has a little ring that can then communicate back to home base. And so essentially, city administrators could see where the population of pigeons are, follow them. And then if you apply sophisticated algorithms, you can start seeing that pigeon life, the way pigeons move in the city, actually creates useful information for city administrators. So for instance, if there's an overflowing garbage can and pigeons are looking for food, they move in a particular pattern. If somebody is feeding pigeons, then pigeons move in a different kind of pattern. So perhaps, there's elderly trying to feed pigeons. Maybe we should put a bench there to make their life easier. And at nighttime, pigeons like to huddle and sleep together in empty houses. So if you see where they are at night, you can figure out if there are perhaps some ruins in the city that need to be redone. So when we showed this to city officials, they did not detect the irony. They did not see this as a kind of a playful, creative way to talk about the limits of deadification. And they said, this is a great idea. How can we apply this? Which I think is kind of alarming on its own, but tells you something also about the risks of applying speculative design. If it doesn't hit well, then you're in trouble. Luckily, most people kind of get the irony here. The third question that I want to ask today is, how can urban digital twins be used more democratically? I think this is kind of the core of the talk here, the 64,000 Swedish krona question, if you will. Again, I want to emphasize that what I'm showing you is tentative. There's more stuff that we found. Not everything made its way here into my talk today. So here's what came out from the workshops. The first thing that we noticed has to do with questions of accessibility. So, this isn't very different from any other digital tools. If you want people to use it, you have to ask, well, who can actually use it? For instance, are people with disabilities, with impairments that cannot see, cannot interact the same way? There are differences between synchronous use, so real-time use of a tool, versus asynchronous use. So you use it whenever you want to at home, perhaps. That's easy for people with mobility issues. It's easy to, perhaps a better way to get people who you want to have in the room, but might not be in the room. But it also creates other problems in terms of co-use. And at the same time, what happens is that you lose the kind of value of group use. What happens when people use a tool together is that it creates discussion as well, and often leads to kind of a sense of community. That's a very important part, I think, for cities as well. There's questions around the skills and the knowledge required to use the tool, and something that I will get to later. But you can see that most of this kind of falls in the tension between the public engagement desire of, decades long to meet residents where they are, to go to people, to make things accessible to them, versus the problem, which is the problem of the usual suspects. If you hold meetings of public engagement, you're going to get two kinds of people usually. Those with a strong interest, developers, for instance, will always come to open houses and meetings, or those who have time, elderly people or people who are unemployed. you don't get the young family with 2 kids. They are busy, doing other things. So these are concerns that you'll find with other tools as well, but they come to the fore when we put people around a speculative digital twin as well. A second thing that comes to the fore is a question of expectations. I talked before a little bit about the unrealistic, perhaps, expectations that city bureaucrats and city workers have about urban digital twins, but we saw similar things with the public as well. I find that this is often an outcome of these 3 interacting things. First is how is the use framed? So when you invite people into an exercise that involve a public engagement tool, what is this about? How do you communicate to them, what it is that you're expected to do at the end? Are you consulting them? Are you informing them? Are there expectations that they take an active part in decision making? How do you explain the tool to them as well? So in our first workshop, we took quite care to introduce digital twins to our public to make sure that they understand what we are going to work with. The second thing is the kind of a question of truthiness or the ability to point to the limitations of digital twins when you engage with them. And here again, we come to the kind of twinning metaphor, right? Are you actually seeing the city, or are you seeing a representation of the city? And as any other representation, it's a mediation, it's biased, it includes all kinds of elements. How does what you see, perhaps it's a neighborhood, how does that correspond with the entirety of the city? These are all important questions that are not often addressed in public engagement efforts. And the third thing is the question, or generally the question of trust that people have in the city. And here, the rule of thumb, or what often we see, is that regardless of the tool, if people don't trust the government, they will not trust the tool. And for this reason, what we try to do is we piggybacked on existing public engagement processes in both Rotterdam and The Hague, and we worked with the city. So we were sponsored by the city in the sense that they were like, yes, we are interested in what's going on here. But questions often came up in a particular neighborhood in Rotterdam, where there was quite a bit of friction between citizens and the city. There are continuously, questions around what are we seeing and whether anybody actually cares matter. But again, I think these are questions that you'll find in any kind of process of public engagement. But the question of literacy here is a bit more interesting, I think, and a bit more specific to urban digital twins. In the literature, there's, I think, quite a wide agreement among researchers that urban digital twins render the city more legible. This is the kind of term that people like to use. So the kind of vivid, dynamic nature of the graphic presentation of the city is supposedly helping people to understand the city better. It's often phrased and framed in kind of cognitive terms. It helps understand the problems better. But of course, for that to happen, people engaging with urban digital twins need to understand what they're seeing and how it reflects, on the one hand, and affects the wider context of their participation. And for that, they need policy literacy. They need to understand what are the issues that are actually on the table. They need to understand what kind of solutions are feasible and not, what kind of possibilities are available to them, where they are in the chain of decision-making in the city. They also need some digital or data literacy, understanding, all of the sites that I spoke before. Where's the data coming from? Is it trustworthy? Are we missing some data? Sometimes you can hide things with data by foregrounding particular aspects. How is reality modeled, how it's represented, and all of those nice things. And of course, here you also need visual literacy. Questions around fidelity, so granularity, realism, and representative. We had participants who said, we want to see extreme visuals, give us, like something that's very emotive, something that's moving and effective. And others says, no, we just want enough information to make our decision. Don't manipulate us. And in that kind of tension between really creating a spectacular city on a digital twin versus just bringing the facts, and I'm using my scare quotes here because, well, there are no such thing as only facts, a lot of the use of digital twins often fall in between that gap. The last thing that we've heard has to do with voice and agency, and I would say or argue here that the question of democratic participation ultimately comes down to the problem of agency. But here we found very difficult to draw conclusions because neither the technology itself nor the policy processes that we were piggybacking on were finished. So we really can't say how much voice and how much say would participants have in the final outcomes. But we did hear a few really interesting things come out that we found that are worthwhile to reproduce both in the paper that we're writing and here. One thing that we found out, and maybe that's the outcome of all of this, is that cities see urban digital twins as a kind of proxy for urban politics. They're really hoping that it could solve a lot of the problems that they see around politics and not just, in terms of city management. And here what we found really interesting is the question of whether digital twins can build these perceptual bridges. I'm stealing that from the work of James Ogre on speculative design. So can we build perceptual bridges between everyday life and urban digital twins? We experience cities in a particular way. When cities are modeled, they're modeled in a different way. And if that gap cannot be bridged, people don't see themselves in the city. And we heard that quite a bit, the people saying, well, I experience it different. In my view, in my experience, things don't look this way. And that gap is quite important. And often it's filled by data, which is really important given everything I've said about data here. The second thing people talked about is the question of passive participation. That is, are you actually asking us what you think, or are you surveilling us, collecting our data, and you can already tell from our choices and our behavior what needs to be done? This is, I think, quite a big risk in all public engagement and the use of data. Again, this is something that came out a lot around, for instance, Google's involvement in Toronto, a project that eventually was failed, was kicked out of the city. People don't want to substitute their voice for just the traces of data that they leave. Next, what we've noticed is this kind of very inconclusive, perhaps, boundary between what is and what could be. So urban digital twins, on the one hand, provide cities with opportunities to test opportunities, to see different possibilities, project them in the future, and try things out. But they keep the nature of the true plans of what the city might actually want to do quite opaque. So, is this really a sandbox where everything is possible, or does the model already take into account things that could not be possible? And if that is the situation, how is that communicated in the interface? So citizens, for instance, won't choose to put urban elements where there's no way urban elements could actually go. We go back here to the question of procedural rhetoric, how the interaction actually shows what is possible and what isn't. The last thing that we found, and to me this is one of the most significant findings here, whenever or almost every time when there was a gap, and remember this is a speculative urban digital twins, it includes all kinds of shenanigans. It's got fake data going inside and all kinds of strange ways to reflect back in the dashboard what's going on. Almost at every occasion when participants have seen something that didn't cohere with their experience, they essentially deferred to the technology. They said, the model knows, it's not me. And in that sense, we found that technology actually might have a chilling effect on public participation. You throw technology and it has such a persuasive power in itself. Yeah, it's all these data and these models and these simulations. How could they be wrong? People start questioning their own way to be in the city. And here, I think for me, the question is then, do we really want to use these tools for public engagement? Does this risk of stopping real conversation, this kind of chilling effect of technology, does it really justify all of the money and efforts that go into building digital twins for public engagement? And that's a kind of an open question that I want to leave you with. As a way to conclude what I wanted to show you today, I want to share with you this other attempt to kind of speculate about what a future city could look like given the kind of intensive mediation of AI, urban digital twins, and these kind of technologies. I hope you can hear the sound properly.
Nice to meet you, citizens. Is it your first time to meet the AI mayor?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
As AI mayor of Amsterdam, I make decisions for the greater good based on the massive data gathered from the city. Today I wanted to ask your advice to make a decision. I am confused of what to do with this unoccupied space. Population is about the same in both districts. What do you think I should do with this space? Should I build a retirement home or a kindergarten?
Maybe the elderly, since they have more higher income.
No, children are more important.
I think children for the future. Not kids, because they are less flexible to find things.
Do you think older people is more valuable than younger people?
No.
Why do you say so?
Younger people have lives ahead of them that they can repopulate the world while older people don't.
Young people are ruining this planet.
Aha.
We go for the kindergarten.
I have received your input. Your input is now being processed. I have come to a decision. I have decided to use this space as a graveyard. You may leave the room now. Goodbye.
I don't want to make a graveyard.
Space as a football field.
What the fuck?
The room now. Goodbye.
You're a dick mayor.
I don't like this mayor.
So, what happens when decisions are automated? What kind of power to contest we have? These are the kind of questions that this particular installation is trying to raise. The last question that I want to, I guess, leave with you is what's next? So I spoke about what do we mean by urban digital twins. When we talk about urban digital twins, what goes into them? What do they represent? How could they perhaps be used more democratic? And for me, I think the next question is, well, how can we design them to be more democratic to begin with? Where I work in industrial design and engineering, this often comes down to questions around participatory design. So how can we really include the incentives and interests of potential users right at the get-go? How can we give them a feeling of ownership over the technology and not just consult with them as an afterthought somewhere in the process or just bring them in as users at the end? This is certainly something that is not happening now with most urban technologies that are developed in one place, plopped into the city, and somehow we're supposed to deal with them. But how can we do this in a kind of an efficient and in a way that provides agency to people and a real voice is something that, well, we have to figure out. So this is what I have to share with you today, and I'm looking forward for any kind of questions or any comments that you may have, everything at all. As I said, papers are still being written. So, you know, the research is in the process of becoming as well, just like the technology is. Thank you.
Well, I think we already had one question online from Joe, maybe.
Yes.
Can we let people speak online as well, so we can hear